What is up, Packer friends and family? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thank you so much again for joining me today. Always appreciate it. Today's topic is going to be 5 Packers that maybe have been a bit forgotten, maybe not talked about. The buzz isn't quite there. And I wanted to sort of bring these players back into the conversation because whether these players, have the opportunity to just make the team or make a serious impact on the roster this upcoming year, I legitimately believe these 5 players have not been talked about enough for what I don't even know if I want to say like contributions could be, but just who they are as football players and what they could potentially bring to the Packers. So I want to kick things off and start by talking about running back Kylin Hill. Now, the difficult aspect here with Kylin is he's coming off a torn ACL. We don't exactly know when he may return. We don't know if he's going to look exactly like he did a season ago coming off an ACL injury. Precision cuts were a huge part of who he is as a player. So again, if you're coming off a torn ACL, there's going to be some question of, can he still have that same level of agility, flexibility? Are those cuts still as sharp and as precise as they were pre-ACL? Does it take him a year to get back? Some of those sort of things. But let's just rewind a season ago. Kylin Hill was one of the real darlings and players who was getting a ton of buzz during training camps, mini camps, OTAs, rookie mini camps, etc. a season ago. Really started to make an impact in preseason. In preseason, he had 23 touches for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a 22-yard receiving touchdown. In the regular season, the big thing a couple things I want to mention here. He had 10 kick returns and was really their primary kick returner, had a really nice 41-yard kick return, which aided one of those 53 scoring plays that I talked about the other day. And the other really big thing that I want to make mention of here is that despite having Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, 2 players that need no third running back to take carries away from either of them. 2 running backs who could easily be, your bell cow back and get the vast majority of touches, already splitting between the 2 of them. The Packers developed a package specifically for Kylin Hill and got him on the field on offense because they wanted more of Kylin Hill. They were intrigued enough by his potential and what he could bring to the team that they made sure that they got him touches at running back despite having A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones on the roster. That should tell you all you need to know about what the Packers thought of the potential of Kylin Hill, because let me tell you, it is not easy to take A.J. Dillon or Aaron Jones off the field, or even just design plays or packages where Kylin Hill is on the field in those situations, right? So this is a player that the Packers clearly thought highly of a season ago, had the very, very unfortunate ACL injury, but do not rule him out coming back from that injury and still playing a role within this offense. And maybe he just does become the number 3 running back eventually, and Jones and Dillon are the 2 primary ball carriers, and maybe they don't get quite back to Kylin Hill being that guy, but Kylin Hill could still be a kick returner. If anything happens to Dillon or Jones, Hill has more than enough talent to get in and really be more than a replacement level player. He would fill in incredibly well for Aaron Jones if it's Jones that goes down. If it's Dillon, they're 2 totally different players, right? But the fact that you have that type of player who's going to come back at some point this season, probably starts the season on the PUP list, although I don't want to limit Hill in any capacity, but you're going to get him back at some point, and you just have him chilling there as a running back with that much talent. I think that's a pretty exciting thing, and it's very easy to forget about players who are coming back from injury or who maybe didn't make this huge splash a season ago. But again, don't forget that Kylin Hill was one of the real talked about players throughout all of training camp and preseason a season ago, and was destined for even more touches and as the primary kick returner and get more packages had he been able to stay healthy. Unfortunately, he didn't, but there's no reason he can't come back and have a real impact on the team this year. And even if it's not this year, right? Even if I fully expect Hill to stick around in some capacity through the remainder of the season. And as we move forward and as Aaron Jones's contract becomes much more questionable, and if Green Bay wants to move on, this at some point very well could become the A.J. Dillon and Kylin Hill offense. So Kylin Hill is, either way you look at it, not a player that you want to quickly forget about that the Packers have at their disposal at some point this season and into the future. The next one up, interestingly enough, is a running back. And it's not Kylin Hill, and it's not Aaron Jones, and it's not A.J. Dillon, and it's actually Patrick Taylor. And this might be a surprise to some people, mostly because, as you may have heard from me already this offseason, I've already advocated for 2 running backs on the 53 up until the time that Kylin Hill gets back. Patrick Taylor, and then, probably Goodson and Baylor could be on the practice squad up until the time that you actually need that third roster running back. But the thing that I want to very, succinctly say about Patrick Taylor is, if there's one player on the roster that I don't think people quite understand how good of a football player he is and gets no talk whatsoever, it's Patrick Taylor. He is a big guy. And I know AJ Dillon gets all the buzz for thighs the size of I don't even know what, but Patrick Taylor is a tall, physical football player who consistently impresses in practices, catches the ball incredibly clean out of the backfield, and just is really good at the sport of football. Now, to be clear here, I can't say with any level of certainty that Patrick Taylor is going to be a 53-man roster player this upcoming season. In fact, as I've mentioned in the past, I think that there's a good chance that maybe Green Bay goes with one of the undrafted free agents, or even maybe goes with 2 running backs until Kylin Hill gets back. And when Kylin Hill gets back, that spot becomes much more questionable as to whether even Patrick Taylor or the 2 undrafted free agents would be in the conversation. But there's a good chance that Patrick Taylor still makes it through to the Packers practice squad. And either way, I think he very much is a talented football player that, if given the right opportunity and the right chance, could have a lot of success in this league. To temper expectations on that a little bit, I'm not saying Patrick Taylor's all of a sudden going to get a shot and become a Pro Bowl running back, but I think this is a guy where if all of a sudden you needed him to be one of your primary backs for 3 or 4 games, I think he could be a 25 touch, 100 yard, 25 touch, 100 yard, 4 yard per carry average and a touchdown type running back in this style of offense. I really think that that's not without of the realm of possibility whatsoever. In fact, I would go as so far to say that I think Green Bay made a mistake last year in the playoff game when AJ Dillon went down. Instead of just going with Aaron Jones and passing the ball a ton, especially in that weather, I think they should have pounded the rock with Patrick Taylor and had him take that AJ Dillon role on. I don't think that we talk enough about Dillon's injury in that game and how it affected the game plan, but B, I don't think it needed to. I think you put Patrick Taylor in that game plan, and I think he can have 80 to 85% of the success that AJ Dillon would have had in that same game. So I think that there was a missed opportunity there. You go back to preseason a season ago, Patrick Taylor had 25 touches for 111 yards, had 25 touches for 92 yards and a touchdown in the regular season, even without consistent touches in any capacity. Against the Lions in the Jordan Love game, the last game of the season when they lost, there was a 12-play, 57-yard touchdown drive in which Patrick Taylor on that drive had 9 of the touches for 43 yards and the touchdown. So again, you're starting to see some of the, when he got an opportunity, it's not like he was lighting the world on fire. It's not like he's going and breaking 40-yard runs. It's not like he's putting together a 200-yard performance or anything like that. But again, you're talking about a guy that, in my opinion, if you gave him the rock, could have 25 touches, 100 yards, and a touchdown pretty consistently if he got that level of workload. So what that means this upcoming season for Patrick Taylor and this running back group, I don't know. But this is more to let people know Patrick Taylor is a really good football player, and he has the ability to make an impact if given the opportunity. I know Tyler Goodson, even BJ Baylor a little bit, are the flavor of the week right now with being the freshest undrafted free agents. But don't forget about Patrick Taylor, and I think he could make an impact if ever given the opportunity. All right, next up is Chris Barnes. And once again, we get sort of sidetracked by the flashy, shiny new toys, right? And clearly, Quay Walker is one of the flashiest, shiniest new toys as he was the Packers' first pick in this last year's draft. There's a lot of expectations for him. He looks like an absolute stud. The idea and dream of playing Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell side by side has many people, myself included, salivating at what the speed and coverage ability at the linebacker position could be this upcoming year. Quay Walker can be an unbelievable blitzer, but this section is not supposed to be about Quay Walker. It's supposed to be about Chris Barnes. And the thing that I want to sort of also mention here is not everyone on the 53-man roster is destined to be a star, right? You're going to have, 5 to 10, 12 stars on your team, whatever that ends up being. And then you just need guys who are your workers, right? The guys that are going to do some of the small things, do some of the grunt work, and just be solid football players. We talk about having depth all the time and how important it is, and that you're only as good as your weakest link a lot of times on both offense and on defense. And we have seen times in the past where the Packers haven't even had good enough starting linebackers as good as Chris Barnes. And now he profiles probably more as a number 3 linebacker, as a situational linebacker, maybe more in on early downs this upcoming season while Quay Walker plays more of the passing downs. I think there's probably a platoon that could be had there. Now, if Walker blows the roof off of everything, then maybe there's not. But listen, even if Chris Barnes just profiles as the Packers' number 3 linebacker, this is a player who went from undrafted free agent to starter, played some really solid and important snaps for the Packers defense, even was the guy who wore the green dot and called the plays inside the huddle. To have that guy on your bench as depth and as a potential situational player and rotational piece, to have the experience calling the plays, all those sort of things, it has incredible value. And maybe it's Walker and Campbell and Barnes doesn't play that much. Even then, just the fact that you have that guy in your bench in depth, the guy that can run your second team defense in practices, do a lot more on scout team, the guy that can now play more on special teams because he isn't one of your starters. I just think there is a potential solid role there for Barnes. And even if he's just number 3 on your depth chart at linebacker, he provides great value in that spot. And I love the depth that Green Bay has now with those top 3, Campbell, Walker, Barnes. And don't count Barnes out for, battling tooth and nail and doing everything that he can to take even some snaps away from Quay Walker and keep himself on the field. He has had to fight for everything, and I expect him to continue to fight this upcoming season for any snaps that he can possibly get. Number 4 on my list is Packers tight end Robert Tonyan. Sort of Kylin Hill situation here, right? A player coming off a torn ACL. You just don't know when he's going to come back, what he's going to look like, what he can bring to the table in that first season back. But I think it's so quick and easy to forget that Robert Tonyan 2 years ago was coming off, or like 2 years ago had a 52 catch, 586 yard, 11.3 yard average, 11 touchdowns, 33 first downs, 9.9 yards per target, and an 88.1% catch rate as a tight end. Probably should have been a Pro Bowler. Did he luck into a couple of those plays? He did. Did he deserve better results on other plays where the ball just didn't get his way? He did. In my opinion, that season broke even, and he was deserving of every, touchdown and reception and everything that he did well in that season. He also was serviceable as a blocker. He's never going to be a good blocker. He's never going to be a player that you want in a key situation as a blocker, but he's an effort blocker, and more often than not, he does enough at least to get in the way and be serviceable, unlike some other tight ends in Green Bay, such as a Jimmy Graham or those sort of players who just couldn't block at all. He does have some value as a blocker and has showed that over the last couple seasons and has improved in that area. I think it's also easy to forget that he was the star of training camp a season ago. Like, he caught everything in training camp. He was an absolute stud. It looked like he was ready for, if you thought 2019 or 2020 was a breakout season, in training camp, he looked like he was going to explode in the 2021 year. Now, it didn't start off that way, and he did not have the beginning of the 2021 season that he would have liked to have had. 18 catches, 204 yards, 2 touchdowns. Just wasn't, he had some very uncharacteristic drops because he has phenomenal hands, and just he never really got in a rhythm, and it was definitely disappointing, especially based off of the season he had the prior year and the training camp that he had. But I have zero doubt that if he doesn't get hurt, he was going to have a major impact on that team still. And for a team who is in desperate need of red zone threats and middle of the field threats this upcoming year, when Robert Tonyan gets back, he should be a huge key player in those 2 roles. And as I was going through my 53, touchdown series of all the touchdowns that Green Bay scored this past season and on those drives, here were some of the big plays on just those touchdown drives that popped out to me. Rodgers to Tonyan, 19-yard completion. Rodgers to Tonyan, 22-yard touchdown. Rodgers to Tonyan drew a 25-yard pass interference penalty. Rodgers to Tonyan drew a 24-yard pass interference penalty. Rodgers to Tonyan, 20-yard touchdown. Rodgers to Tonyan, 33-yard completion. Those were just in the first, 8 games of the season, I think it was, for Tonyan before he got hurt. And those were some of the big plays that Tonyan was able to generate on those touchdown drives that he was a huge key part of. So getting him back reintegrated in the offense. We've talked all offseason about the different wide receiver weapons and how involved Jones and Dillon are going to be, that Tyler Davis could maybe take a step at tight end. But don't forget about Robert Tonyan and the player that he has become over his course of his career. And also don't forget that he's going to be highly motivated. This should have been a huge paycheck season for Robert Tonyan. Instead, coming off the ACL, he has to sign a cheap one-year deal with the Packers. If he can go out and show that he is still capable of playing at the level he did in 2020, then look out. He is going to get paid this next offseason, and he has everything to play for this upcoming year as soon as he is back from injury. And then last but not least is Dean Lowry. And I think a lot of people have talked about Dean Lowry being a potential post-June first cut candidate. I would be shocked at this point if Dean Lowry ended up being released. I can't say without equivocation that there's just no chance of it happening, right? The reason I can't say that is he hasn't actually practiced yet this offseason for Green Bay. He's been in the rehab group for all of the mini camps and OTAs that have been open to the media. So it could mean possibly, while I think there's like a 0.01% chance only, it could mean that in order for Green Bay to avoid having to release him with an injury settlement, that they're hoping to clear him from practice, get him ready for training camp. And once he clears and actually passes his physical, then they're going to release him with a post June 1 designation. There is a incredibly small, minute possibility of that happening, but that's why I can't say 100% for sure it still won't happen. The other reason is I still think that it could slightly be within the realm of possibility that all of a sudden you've got Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt looks really good, Jarran Reed looks really good, TJ Slayton looks really good, and maybe even like a Jonathan Ford looks like a real rotational player. If all of a sudden you get through training camp and those five guys are all healthy and they look better or as good or better than you expected, there could be a conversation that Goot and company have and just saying, all right, at that point, is Dean Lowry at his price point more of a luxury? Even if that were the case, I think Green Bay would more lean towards a restructure and say, is there something we can do here to clear a little bit more space and restructure your deal? Otherwise, we're going to have to release you. I wholeheartedly believe that Dean Lowry is going to be on the team this season. And I'm really hoping that that's also the case. And that is a, change in script for me, as I've talked about Dean Lowry in the past. Before I get there, I do want to say one of my favorite aspects of what Goot and company have done this entire offseason is building up this defensive line. I think for the first time, you have a deep 5 to maybe even 6-man rotation that includes Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Jarran Reed, Dean Lowry, TJ Slayton, maybe even a Jonathan Ford. Like that group looks as good, if not better, than it has in a very long time. For the first time, Kenny Clark seems to have legit running mates since probably the days of Mike Daniels. So when Daniels was playing really good football. So I love this defensive line rotation, and I would hate to see all of a sudden, you release Dean Lowry, and now you have another injury to somebody, and now your depth is really, really thin. And even without Lowry, that rotation just gets a little bit less, right? And I love the fact that I actually think Kenny Clark and TJ Slayton and Devontae Wyatt and this entire group, Dean Lowry, etc., can all be really good because they don't have to play a ton of snaps, because all these guys can rotate in and help each other out, and none of these guys have to play massive snap counts. I think that can help Dean Lowry and Kenny Clark as the season goes along. The other thing that I want to mention here, and why I've changed my tune on Lowry, in 2020, I graded Lowry as a negative 2.05 grade, so a below average player. In 2021, that changed to a plus 2.8 grade, which in and of itself is a very good football player that is helping your team more often than not. But when you look at it even a step further, he had a negative 2.3 grade for the first 4 weeks of the season. And then it was almost like something clicked. And there was actually a story a while back, I think it was around that time, where Coach Montgomery, it seemed like sort of finally got through to Dean Lowry, where you have to stop playing as a finesse player and you need to play as a power player. You need to set the edge. You need to be physical. You need to bull rush. You need to, get your offensive lineman into the backfield, reset the line of scrimmage. And when he started playing like that, negative 2.3 grade in the first 4 weeks. After that, he had a plus 5.1 grade for the remainder of the season. For comparison's sake, Devondre Campbell for the entirety of last season had a plus 5.7 grade for me. Adrian Amos was a plus 5.9. So those two really good players graded at, for the entire season, graded at what Dean Lowry basically was at through the last, 14 games of the season with a plus 5.1 grade. So it seemed like something finally clicked for him. And at the end of the day, he had 6 sacks, 2 hits, 34 hurries, 5 batted passes. That is a very strong rotational player. And if he can be used in that way and all of a sudden start rotating more with Reed and, Slayton and Wyatt and those sort of players, then you're in a really good situation with that defensive line. I would not want to change anything. And don't forget about the contributions that Dean Lowry can make to this defense as well. That is going to do it for me today. Quick recap, 5 players not to sleep on or forget about this offseason or this upcoming season: Kylin Hill, Patrick Taylor, Chris Barnes, Robert Tonyan, and Dean Lowry. Appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.